Welcome to the new session. In this session, we are going to explore the concept of motivation in general and in second language teaching, and learn how to understand motivation from a process-oriented approach, ways to facilitate motivating teaching, and how to classify motivational strategies. There have been various definitions of motivation. Because human behavior has two basic dimensions, or direction, and magnitude or intensity. Motivation, by definition, concerns both of these. It is responsible for the choice of a particular action and the effort expended on it and the persistence with it. Therefore, motivation explains why people decide to do something, how hard they are going to pursue it, and how long they are willing to sustain the activity. In second language learning, one of the most influential L2 motivation researchers to date, Robert Gardner, argued forcefully that a second or foreign language in the school situation is not merely an educational phenomenon or curriculum topic, but also a representative of the cultural heritage of the speakers of that language. Therefore, teaching a language can be seen as imposing elements of other culture into the student's own life space. In order to learn an L2, says French for example, students need to develop a French identity. They need to learn to think French, and though only partially and temporarily, also become a bit French. The truth of the assumption that language and culture are bound together is clearly evidenced in situations where learners, for some reasons, do not like the L2 community and therefore refused to incorporate elements of their culture into their own behavioral repertoire. Thus, language learning is a deeply social event that requires the incorporation of a wide range of elements of the L2 culture. Accordingly, motivation is essential for learners to be successful in a language. Downing, in 2005, argues that motivation is of great importance in second language acquisition. It provides the primary impetus to initiate L2 learning, and later the driving force to sustain the long and often tedious learning process. Indeed, all other factors involved in SLA presuppose motivation to some extent. However, motivation is not stable over time. This means that it takes a dynamic view of motivation, trying to account for the changes of motivation over time. This is an important consideration because when we talk about a prolonged learning activity, such as mastering an L2, motivation cannot be viewed as a stable attribute of learning that remains constant for several months or years. Instead, what most teachers identify is that the students' motivation fluctuates. The main assumption underlying this process-oriented approach is that motivation consists of several distinct phases. First, it needs to be generated. The motivational dimension related to this initial phase can be referred to as choice motivation, because the generated motivation leads to the selection of the goal or task to be pursued. Second, the generated motivation needs to be actively maintained and protected while the particular action lasts. This motivational dimension has been referred to as executive motivation, and it is particularly relevant to learning in classroom settings, where students are exposed to a great number of distracting influences, such as off-task thoughts, irrelevant distractions from others, anxiety about the task, or physical conditions that make it difficult to complete the task. Finally, there is a third phase following the completion of the action, termed motivational retrospection, which concerned the learner's retrospective evaluation of how things went. The way students process their past experiences in this retrospective phase will determine the kind of activities they will be motivated to pursue in the future. Now let's have a look at the first stage, or the pre-actional stage, choice motivation. This stage includes three motivational functions: setting goals, forming intentions, and launching action. The main motivation influences consist of many factors. There are various properties such as goal relevance, specificity, and proximity. Additionally, it also consists of values associated with the learning process itself, its outcomes and consequences, the attitudes towards the second language and its speakers, the learner's expectancy of success and perceived coping potential, belief and strategy, and environmental support or hindrance. The second step is the actional stage, or executive motivation. It includes three motivational functions, namely generating and carrying out subtasks, ongoing appraisal, and action control. The main motivational influences are the quality of learning experience, such as the pleasantness, significance, the learner's sense of autonomy, the influence from teachers and parents, competitive or cooperative classroom reward and goal structures, and the knowledge and use of self-regulatory strategies. The last step, or the post-actional stage, is motivational retrospection. Its functions include forming causal attributions, elaborating standards and strategies, and dismissing intention and further planning. The main influences are attributional factors such as styles and biases, self-concept beliefs like self-confidence and self-worth, and received feedback, praise, and grades. The relationship between these three stages of motivation can be demonstrated by the following example. In an adult language course, it is not at all uncommon to find that some people soon drop out because they realize that they cannot cope with the day-to-day demands of attending the classes and completing the home assignment. However, some of these learners will decide later to re-enroll in the course. In fact, some learners repeat this cycle several times. Why does this happen? From a process-oriented perspective, this behavior is explainable. Enrolling a course is motivated by choice motivation, but the ongoing work that is required during the language course is energized by executive motivation. In the case of dropouts, this later source of motivation is insufficient. However, once a person has dropped out, the average realities of the coursework will be soon forgotten, and the more general considerations about the importance of L2 learning become dominant once again. In other words, the person is back to square one, and choice motivation comes into force again. However, during the third phase of the motivational cycle, motivational retrospection, most such learners will sooner or later draw the necessary conclusion that even though they value knowing an L2, for various reasons they cannot cope with the actual demands of attending a course. This makes them decide to drop out again. Third, a significantly important issue is how to motivate people. Realistically, it is highly unlikely that everybody can be motivated to learn everything, and even generally motivated students are not equally keen on every subject matter. Although rewards and punishments are too often the only tools present in the motivational arsenal of many teachers, it is important to keep in mind that teachers must be able to deliver motivating teaching. Sometimes, the best motivational intervention is simply to improve the quality of our teaching. No matter how competent a motivator or teacher is, if his or her teaching lacks instructional clarity and the learners cannot follow the intended program, motivation to learn the particular subject matter is unlikely to blossom. Among many actions that our teachers can do to have high quality of teaching, there are some suggestions to increase students' motivation to learn. First, explain things simply and make sure that the students can understand your explanations. Use illustration and example to ensure students' comprehension. Second, adopt suitable teaching pace. It should not be too fast or too slow. Give students enough time to practice. Third, ask questions to enhance students' understanding of the lessons and go over difficult assignment units until students fully understand the instruction. And fourth, prepare students well for future tasks. Now we are going to have an overview of motivational strategies. Motivational strategies are techniques that promote the individual's goal-related behaviors. Because human behavior is rather complex, there are many diverse ways of promoting it. Motivational strategies refer to those motivational influences that are consciously exerted to achieve some systematic and enduring positive effect. With respect to the various strategies promoting classroom L2 learning, there are several ways to organize them into separate themes. These are the basic themes of organizing motivational strategy. Focus on the internal structure of a typical language class and cluster the strategy according to the various structure units. For example, strategies to present new material, give feedback, set up communicative tasks, or assign homework. Design a primarily troubleshooting guide in which some particularly problematic facets of the classroom motivational life are listed and suggestions are offered on how to handle this. For example, how to deal with students' laziness, lack of voluntary participation, or anti-learning influences of deviant children. Focus on key motivational concepts such as intrinsic interest, self-confidence, or students' autonomy, and use these as the main organizing units. Center the discussion on the main types of teacher behavior that have motivating effects, such as showing a good example and modeling student behavior, communication and rapport with the students, conscious need raising about self-regulated strategy, or stage managing classroom events. To wrap up this section, I would like to invite you to watch a video on how teachers and students perceive the importance of creating motivating activities for students to learn, and how teachers all over the world motivate students of different age groups to learn a second language. I hope you will find it useful experience. Thank you.
Engaged, it looks like a mess. In a really good classroom, I can't even see the teacher because the teacher is engaged in some conversation or huddling down with the students, talking to them. But I see students who are doing something. They're doing something with language.
Сейчас месяц октябрь, умничка. Посмотрите, Сэмми правильно нашел нам слово, название месяца октябрь.
Involve the students in their learning. I think a lot of times we want to talk too much. That's hard. I can't do 80 minutes of talking.
睡习球。一言对，一直说打篮球，打篮球，打篮球，打篮球，打篮球。
The way she teaches is she makes it fun.
If the teacher is engaged, if the teacher is focused, if the teacher is planning meaningful lessons, that tells the students that the teacher cares about them, cares about their learning, wants them to be successful, wants them to succeed, and will do anything that they can to help them.
When is the peak period to teach new material? When is it going to be pretty natural for the kids to need a brain break? When is there going to be a natural time where attention starts to wane? So that's a great time to engage kids in some sort of activity. Pair work and small group work provide a wonderful opportunity for kids to practice language.
I do definitely appreciate the teachers that take the time to come up with activities that teach curriculum in an exciting way.
美国。
今天下大雨，大雨。今天下小雨。
We need to think outside of the box, and we need to get away from a one-type methodology or I'm going to rely on the textbook and I'm going to rely on those grammar worksheets because they're comfortable to me.
Kids so often are trapped in desks all day in other classrooms and don't really get to move until it's time for classes to change.
球，高尔夫球，打保龄球。好。If they are moving around and saying the words and actually playing the sports in their imaginations, I found I can teach them a lot more stuff in a very short amount of time.
I kind of find myself a lot of times as being an actress or just really jumping around and making sure that if I'm alive, you know, I'm alert, they'll be alert and they'll be with me.
I want them to be part of this activity as well. They get to move around, they get to move their hands, their emotions, eyes, facial expressions. That way, I think that they can internalize the learning.
Хорошо. Еще что у нас есть? Нос. У нас, конечно, есть нос. Еще. И ступни. Не забудь, как называются они. Молодец. Что у нас еще есть в нашем теле? Уши, конечно, у нас есть.
You just make the class come alive, and that's what happened with the teachers that I loved and enjoyed, is that they made the culture and the country and the people and the language that we were learning come alive and showed me how I can use it.
Avery, сколько теперь лет? Мне 6 лет. Сколько тебе лет? Мне 6 лет.
A really important part of any language learning is being able to excite your students about that language, is make sure that they're enjoying learning the language.